I wake to piercing screams ripping me from my sleep. It takes me a few seconds to realise it's Danny, my 14-year-old son. Deathly still, I listen as his screams turn into sobs, but eventually they subside. It's quiet. The rain lulls me into discombobulated sleep. But it's no use. Tossing and turning only gets me more frustrated. Passing by Danny's bedroom on my way to the kitchen in the morning, I hear him talking to himself again. It sends cold shivers down my spine. After boiling the kettle, I make the strongest black coffee I can handle, and I sit in front of the electric heater. But that does not take away the chills. I contemplate my life and all that's happened in the past year, when our lives were turned upside down and forever altered. Who could have imagined the price we were soon to pay? When Danny was 10 years old, he was diagnosed with a congenital heart disease. The specialist said he was probably born with it, but it wasn't detected until after the collapse of school one day on the field playing soccer. After several tests, they concluded their diagnosis. After waiting 3 years on the recipients list, we finally got the call. They'd found a heart for Danny. It happened so fast from there, it spun me around in circles. Apparently, a donor had just died. We bundled Danny into the car and sped to the hospital. At the beginning, I asked several times who the heart belonged to, but I was told the family wanted to remain anonymous. In hindsight, I should have pushed for more information, but at the time, it was all a chaotic rush. Kathy, my wife, and I, we stayed for the entire 8-hour procedure, holding each other's hands, drinking disgusting coffee from paper cups, and staring at the windows as the day turned into all-consuming darkness. We spent years ensuring Danny wasn't doing anything that could damage his heart further. No more basketball on the weekends. Even riding his bike could be dangerous. That could put too much strain on his heart. We used to go on hikes. That too, we had to give up. He could continue school, but he got teased a lot because of his fragile heart. There were many not-so-physical activities we did together to make up for him not being able to do the things normal boys his age were doing. We'd go to the movies, swim at the beach, or the river down the road. Walking short distance was okay, as long as he didn't overexert himself. After the transplant, he remained in hospital for several days. When we came home, we were thrilled. Life got better with his new heart. Not just for Danny, but for Kathy and I too. It was a huge relief. We could instantly see a change. Danny wasn't breathless anymore. He could run up the stairs to his bedroom. His energy levels returned, and he walked a lot. Hell, we couldn't even get him to shut up. This was new, but then everything he started doing was new to us. One day I caught him smoking a cigarette in the garden. I was livid. "You can't be doing that, son. Someone died to give you their heart, and you repaid them by smoking? Put it out now, and go finish the rest of the dishes," I reprimanded him. "Yep, sure, Dad. Sorry, I was craving one for some reason." "It's fucking awful. Why the hell do you smoke these things?" he said, walking back towards the house. "Mind your fucking language," I yelled after him. Kathy had quit a job at the local bakery soon after the transplant because someone had to be home to look after Danny. At the time, I was working as supervisor at the local power plant. After several weeks, I insisted it was time Danny went back to school. It's only natural after such upheaval to want things to go back to some sort of routine. Danny claimed that he was too tired to go to school. At the time, we thought he just needed more time. Initially, I believed everything would go back to normal, but whenever I asked him if he wanted to shoot hoops, he laughed at me. We brought him a new bike for his birthday, but that didn't tempt him at all. This became his usual response to everything I'd suggest. "Dad, I'm not interested." That was old me. To say I was disappointed would be a gross understatement. He was staying up all night playing games on his PlayStation, and he'd sleep the day away. This isn't what we wanted, not at all. Before the transplant, we could manage his game time. Not anymore. I guess because of the transplant, we felt like he needed time to adjust. Acclimatized to his new condition, but it was like he'd aged overnight. His bedroom, which he used to keep immaculate, was now an ashtray for cigarette butts, a rubbish tin for his trash, dirty dishes piling up, and his clothes strewn across the room. I remember telling a colleague about it, but he just laughed, saying, "Welcome to the world of teenagers." Needless to say that did not help me in the slightest. One day while I was at work, I received a disturbing call from Kathy.
You need to come home. Now!
She said in between sobs. Slow down and take a breath. What the hell is going on? For fuck's sake. I can't just drop everything and come home. You can handle it. Whatever it is. Kathy, you there? The phone went dead, so I waited to call her back, but she didn't. I tried for half an hour to reach her, but the landline and cell phone were also unanswered. I knew then and there something was terribly wrong. I raced home as fast as I could. Kathy, where are you? I yelled as soon as I arrived. I ran around the house searching for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Coming from Danny's bedroom, I could hear music, but it wasn't music my son would usually listen to. It sounded like something barking into a microphone. I think they call it death metal. When I entered without knocking, he was lying on top of the covers, naked and smoking. It wasn't until I recognised the stench from my experimental drug days in my late teens that he was smoking weed. Danny, what the hell? After I turned off the stereo system, I looked at him in shock. For a split second, I saw him as a young man, not my 14-year-old son. It spooked the hell out of me. What do you think you're doing? Is that a joint? Yeah. Want some? He asked as he held it out for me to take. I ripped it from his fingers and threw it out the window. Dad, what are you doing? That's mine. Whatever, I can get more. Where's your mother? I asked, trying to defuse the situation. I don't know. I've been up here all day. Maybe she went out. I stormed out of his room, slamming the door behind me. Rage was building inside of me and I wasn't sure if I could handle it. Best I removed myself from the situation. I ran out the backyard and screamed at the sky as the rain pelted me. Several minutes later, I went back inside to find my wife. Her car was still in the garage. Her purse, wallet and cell phone were sitting on the counter. She couldn't have left the house without them. Becoming frantic, I searched again. This time I checked the basement just in case. I could hear her screams as soon as I reached the bottom step, racing with my heart in my mouth. I found her locked in the storage room where the power circuit is located. James, thank God you found me. I was terrified. She burst out and grabbed me, holding on for dear life. She was a shivering mess as I soothed her as best as I could. What happened? 1 minute I was talking to you and the next minute you're gone. Why are you here? I was speaking to you, then the power went out, cutting off the landline phone. I went to check the power board and the door slammed behind me. Then I couldn't get out. I don't know what happened, she cried. The door was locked when I got you out. That's weird, I said, examining the door. Why did you want me to come home right away? You were saying that something happened? Danny was walking around the house naked and I'm sure he was smoking weed. I told him to get to his room and put some clothes on, but he laughed in my face. There is something wrong with Danny. He's not the same. Kathy, calm down. I'll have a word with him and then I'll call someone to come change the lock on the door in case it's defective. How about we go upstairs and have a coffee? Trust me, we can sort this out. It'll be okay, I said, not really believing a word I was saying. Danny had started talking to himself, and when we actually got to see him, he often muttered under his breath. He stopped coming down for dinner, preferring to feed in his bedroom instead, and not with us, as a family. Danny had an ensuite. He hardly used the main bathroom, so there was no way to tell how often he showered. But if the stench emanating from his bedroom was an indication, he certainly wasn't grooming, and the condition of his bedroom didn't help. When finally he graced us with his presence, he was a mess. Hair a tangled mop, food stuck to his chest, and he was growing bum fluff on his chin. I don't recall him having facial hair at this age. Odd? That wasn't the worst of it. The noises coming from his bedroom were horrifying. Besides the constant chatter and swearing, he was making grunting and growling noises. They sounded demonic and gave me nightmares. I'd be running after Danny, his little boy and his sweet pearls of laughter surrounded us, but he falls down a hole in the ground. I grab onto his arm. He pulls me in, and down the tunnel of fire we fall. I'd often wake sweating, swearing, and my lungs craving precious air. Once, in the middle of the night, I saw Danny walk out of our bedroom. I was momentarily puzzled by it. Kathy was clinging to the sheets, her face pale in the moonlight slicing through the blinds. My heart skipped a beat when I saw what Danny was holding in his hands. A knife. Its blade reflecting in the light from the hallway. As he closed the bedroom door quietly, I could hear his bare feet padding softly down the hall. My skin was crawling as I reached for the lamp switch. I'm moving out, Kathy said. Okay, I replied. The next day she was gone. No fanfare, just tears. No goodbyes, just see you soon. Her tears wet my cheeks, her eyelids feeling like wet butterfly wings. As she turned her back, she suddenly stopped. Looking up, I searched, and there he was. Danny was standing at the window, licking the glass and waving. After Kathy fled, I had to quit my job and take care of Danny. I was practically living like a prisoner in my own home. To be honest, I was afraid of him. His rage was out of control, and each time I put my foot down over his behaviour, he responded by smashing windows and punching holes in the walls. Kathy would call sometimes to check that I was okay, or still alive. After the way she left, seeing the way our flesh and blood behaved that day, she never asked about him. I know she was broken as me, but she didn't have to live the reality of it all. She just left us to our own devices. Me having to watch our 14-year-old son walking around the house in his briefs, smoking fuck knows what, and drinking beer all day, his mustache thickening, and his hairy chin, spindly wires forming on his chest, and stinking like the dead. That is not my son, I screamed down the phone and to the doctor.
Settle down. What are you talking about? Is he in good health?
I don't fucking know.
Is his heart still beating?
Very fucking funny. Of course it's still beating. That's why I'm calling you. Something isn't right. He's a completely different person.
Is he exercising? Getting out and about? Socialising?
Oh yeah. He has some great mates. Some of them he pays for. Off my credit card.
Well, I don't see any problems. Seems like he's getting on with life.
I was losing it, so I punched a hole in the wall. Then I wallowed down the phone, tears streaming down my face. After pleading my case with the doctor, I buckled to my knees. Although I knew in my heart none of this was Danny's fault, the totality of the situation kicked me hard in the butt. I had to find out who the heart belonged to that was beating inside my son. There had to be a way. So I started writing letters to the hospital, demanding more information. But they never got back to me. Taking it upon myself, I searched the internet. It wasn't that hard to find out who previously belonged to. All I had to do was look for the death on the same day Danny received his new heart. There were only two possibilities. One was a 3-year-old child who had passed away in a car crash. The other, a 20-year-old male. More digging about the guy led me to some devastating discoveries about his terrifying past and criminal record. His name was Trevor Neals, and he was an inmate at the local high-level security prison. I found news articles about Trevor's misdemeanors. He was a monster, and that's putting it mildly. He'd been doing time since he was a teenager. However, due to his young age, I couldn't find any details of the early crimes, but the news articles I found basically gave it away. He'd been sexually abusing his younger siblings, done time for breaking into a neighbour's car and taking it for a joyride, crashing into a motorway. His passenger, a 14-year-old cousin, died in the crash. Trevor was convicted of manslaughter. His life was ended by another inmate who strangled him to death over a gang rivalry within the prison. So that explained the reason why the hospital wouldn't disclose its details to me. Now, what was I supposed to do with this information? How was I going to fix this? I was desperate. I wanted my son back. But how was I supposed to change things that were out of my control? Danny was too young to be kicked out of the house. There was obviously nothing the doctors could do, or could they? I took the bastards to court. I wanted that heart taken out of my child. They offered me compensation, a settlement to keep my mouth closed, but there was no way I was accepting any money when there was more they could do to help. It took months of fighting, but finally they agreed. And instead of the money, they equated to the whole sum of $4 million. They took out his heart. While Danny remained in hospital, either Kathy or I visited him every single day. His disposition had a dramatic change. He was quiet, but not withdrawn. It was especially lovely to hear him giggle at my stupid dad jokes. Only a month later, Danny received a new heart. This time, I ensured I knew who the heart belonged to before I accepted it for Danny. It was coming from a teacher who'd passed away in a bicycle accident. Her name was Mary Ann Cox. She was in her early 30s and a mother of one. Since then, our situation at home had calmed down exponentially. Danny is a completely different person. We play together, hang out, and have resumed the things we used to do before his first transplant. He's actually taken to painting and he's really good at it. He spends quality time in the garden with his easel and paints. I love to watch him from the kitchen window, brushing the canvas with beautiful bright colours. Danny's back at school and making friends. Kathy even moved back in a couple of weeks ago. It's bizarre to think transplant can have such a devastating effect. Here we are taking the heart from a criminal, a deplorable person who happened to be a diabolical monster. How can it be? That heart held on to the life of a person it was taken from. These are all questions I've been researching, trying to find the truth. I've found other people who have had the same happenstance as us. So I began a support group, and although it takes up most of my time these days, everything seems to be ticking along quite nicely. My biggest regret is I didn't push for more information regarding the first heart transplant. Though I believe everything always happens for a reason, I learned the hard way that every decision we make has a consequence. It's what you do with it that counts.